I call this February 27, 2017 Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First thing is approval of the minutes of the February 13, 2017 regular meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I move we approve the minutes from the February 13th, 2017 regular meeting as submitted.
Second.
A motion, and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Okay, it's now past the hour of 7. Dave Parenti, Fire Chief. Introduction of firefighter paramedic Dylan Kessler. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We finally got someone to hire. It's been a long process.
Excellent.
We started back before the first of the year. We put the posting out. We got about 10 applications. Went through the oral board. Don sat on that first oral board we had. Came up with a couple candidates, moved them ahead. Finally found someone we liked, made him an offer, and he said, "No, thank you. I'm going to go to Auburn." Great. So we start the process over again. Second time around, we get 18 applicants. Okay, that's good. We just had a graduation or something. Narrowed them down. This time, Leslie sat on the board for the Board of Selectmen, and great group of candidates. We got it down to 4 again. Brought them up through, and Dylan was one of those 4. And Dylan really stood out for numerous reasons. One of the things I like to look for, as you guys I'm sure know, is your passion in your firefighter. Want someone who wants to do the job and who wants to be here and wants to make a difference. And without question, I saw that. I saw that with Dylan. He's originally from just around the corner from John, correct, John? East Haven, Connecticut?
That's right. We won't hold that against you.
And he has been working for AMR in Springfield, and we're stealing him away from there. He's relocating on the 1st?
On the 1st.
To Berlin. So he's going to be just around the corner. So we're excited to have him in here. He is a fairly new paramedic, so we have some training to do on that end. He's going to be going through the fire academy. Hopefully, he's been accepted into the June 2nd class. We're on the waiting list. We're hoping there's an opening sooner than that. But from what I understand, they're filling up fairly quickly. It's very difficult to get a position. So he's going to be starting on June 2nd. At least that's the plan. And until then, he'll be doing a lot of ambulance calls and becoming familiar with the town and becoming familiar with equipment, meeting all the guys, working with all the guys. He's just about to finish 2 weeks of days. And his first day on shift will be Sunday the 5th. And he'll be assigned to Captain Hurst. So God bless him. We'll see.
Good luck, Dylan.
So normally I was hoping to do a swearing, but unfortunately Andy wasn't able to make it, so we're going to be doing that at a different time. But I did want you all to have a chance to meet Dylan, and if you have any questions, I did tell him he had to do a speech. He got real mad at me. I said, "Nah, I'm just messing with you." But if you have any questions, this is Dylan
No
Kessler.
pressure, Dylan, don't worry. Yes, go ahead, Leslie.
2 things. First of all, I would love if everyone here who is from your department could stand and introduce themselves. That's quite an impressive showing of people from your department who
Sure.
are here this evening. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, that'd be great.
Start down here.
Start in the middle.
Start down there.
Firefighter, paramedic. Captain Dan Brunhart.
Scott Reynolds, firefighter paramedic.
Doug Pulsfer, firefighter paramedic.
Steve Gross, firefighter, paramedic. Nick Johnson, firefighter, paramedic.
Pat Duchimo, firefighter, paramedic.
Chris Tatro, firefighter paramedic.
Rob Town, captain.
Fred Hurst, captain.
Thank you very much. It's quite a show of support, and I'm very proud of our department and everything that you all do. And I think it's a wonderful thing for you to be here and to introduce yourselves to the community. I think people do need to know who you are and understand all the hard work that you all do. So thank you for being here. And I did have the opportunity to interview Dylan, and it was, you were a standout to me. You really, the way you interviewed, the way you came across, again, as Chief said, with your passion. You're very intelligent, insightful, you have a great background, and obviously very, very interested in our department, our community, and I couldn't be more thrilled that you were brought forward to Chief. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, just, congratulations, and, thanks for choosing us as much as we chose you. It's just really glad to have you aboard, and, wish you all the luck and, whatever goes along with it. And, you know, it's just really glad to have you, so take care.
Don, yes.
And also glad to have you, and you're joining a great group of guys, so welcome aboard, and I hope you like it as much as we're going to like you.
It's more of the same. Congratulations. Thank you for coming here. It's an excellent department. I think you'll really enjoy working with the guys and being part of the community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dylan, we appreciate it. Welcome aboard.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Support.
Welcome.
Staying for a minute?
Tomorrow, we just stay.
Okay, moving along. Reports.
Hi, Bill. I have, a couple items to go over, but the most significant one tonight is an incident that took place last summer. I was speaking with one of my neighbors, Judy Armada, who at that time in late July suffered a massive heart attack, which required very rapid medical response and frankly extraordinary effort to address the situation. In speaking with her, she was very highly complimentary to the department. The skill, the professionalism, the ability, the response, and everything. It was just literally a life, saving circumstance. It was something, in her description, it was something like a 60-minute interval between arrival at her residence and transport to the UMass facility. And over those 60 minutes, it was, a life-sustaining effort continually throughout that process. She mentioned, there were some people I want to mention by name because she mentioned them to me. Doug Pulsifer and Ryan Snee were two of the first responders and the two that she recalls most clearly for that part of the incident. Also, Captain Brilhart and Chris Tatro was another responder at that time, in addition to police officer Mike Priscio. So she's very grateful, very thankful, and with her encouragement and permission, asked me to say something about it here tonight, to thank you guys for the excellent job you do. Also, just the remarkable cooperation among the staff, and also the resources you have at your disposal in terms of equipment and everything that made that life-saving effort so successful. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate everything you do. I'm sure this is just one incident of many you guys face every day. So thank you all.
Thank you. You can go now.
So,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Jason. Is there more? Sorry.
I'm going to take a quick walk down the downtown area, if I could.
Yes, go ahead, yep.
Number one, Church Street Culvert, I see that project, the barriers have been moved off to the sides, and we actually have the 3 lanes, 2 coming into the center of town, 1 outbound. So I think that really is making a difference. Scott Charpentier, our DPW director, is here. Just thank you for all the work that's ongoing with that to get that into shape. And now I'm going to complain. As you're driving Church Street, approaching Route 20 there, next to the mobile station, on the right, there's a directional sign for the lanes with arrows or whatever that at the moment is something like a 20-degree angle off the horizontal, which isn't such a bad view actually if you're in the right-hand lane, but I don't think anyone else can see it. So if somebody could take a look at that and repair or remove it, whichever is most appropriate. As we take the right turn and move down that part of West Main Street, R&T Furniture, I had a question actually from a resident who was inquiring what progress, if any, is being made with that site.
Sure. So, as you know, there's a long history with that particular property. A number of the board members have inquired about it in the past. We were in the process of tax title on the property. It has, however, been redeemed and is currently in good standing as far as taxes are concerned. The building inspector did review the property and deemed it to be an unsafe structure and ordered the owner to remove it. The owner subsequently had a review done by a structural engineer who indicated that the property is salvageable, but it needs work. So we were waiting for the owner to submit his plans to bring the structure into compliance. Those plans were not forthcoming, and so we're actually working with town council at the moment to go to land court to follow up on taking enforcement action to either have the structure repaired or removed. So that's where we stand with that. Unfortunately, you know, it's been a structure that has been deteriorating for a long time, and although a structure can be unsightly, it's not necessarily structurally unsound. This particular property is unsound, which means nobody should be going in or out of the building unless they're licensed professionals and are actually making repairs to it. So we're trying, as always, we'll gain compliance one way or another, but we are headed into land court right now to force that compliance.
Thank you, John. And then the last item, I just wanted to say the site of 39 West Main Street, which is the site of the what will be the town common. We've had the demolition of the two structures that were on that site, and as I was driving by it and looking at it, I think with those structures removed, you get a much better sense of what the, the total site will look like. It's easier to visualize with those structures out of the way to see the expanse of it. And just wanted to comment that it seems to be coming along, and I think it's going to really turn out to be a very nice project for the downtown area. So that concludes my report.
Leslie?
Thank you. I just wanted to add on to what Jason just said about the town common area, that it's amazing when those came down. It did change the whole landscape, obviously, of the area, and you do get that idea of how it will eventually look. I know that committee is very excited about it, and I'm just glad they could finally get to that. I know that there was some asbestos abatement, I think, on the outside of that building, John?
Yeah,
Initially, and then...
there was vinyl siding.
Yeah.
When we removed the vinyl siding, there was asbestos siding, so that had to be abated before the building could be raised.
Yes.
So that's all been taken care of.
Oh, yes. So that's wonderful. So that's all starting to look good. I wanted to congratulate the 8 residents who will be running in the Boston Marathon on Monday, April 17th. We have Chris Benestad, John Bourgeois, Peter Butera, Paul Guitard, Jennifer Lacassi, Richard Madamba, Scott Proul, and Kara Rutledge. So that's all very exciting. We always have at least a handful of people running for the Boston Marathon every year, and that's always a very impressive,
Did you forget Bill's name?
impressive thing. You as well. Just thinking about it.
An onlooker. Dream about it. 26 grueling miles.
Yes.
Hey, that's very impressive.
It is very impressive.
Anybody that can finish that race.
Yes.
It is.
So I think that's...
I know.
Also, just a quick reminder again about nfpantry.org. If you have an interest in donating some items to the Northborough Food Pantry, please check that website to see what is needed. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that fairly recently there was a conversation on Facebook about the trash bags. It was another page that I'm on, and people were not really sure who to talk to about it, and I was kind of brought into the conversation. And I advised them to send some notes to Fred Litchfield, the town engineer, about it. But there was definitely some grumbling about the bags again. So I wanted to find out if we could either have Fred come in or have Fred do an update about the bags, because I am finding an inconsistency myself in them. Some of the bags have liners, some don't. Some of them, the top pops right off. You know, the minute you tie the bag, that whole rim just comes up right off, and you're trying to duct tape it together and that sort of thing. So, I know that in the past, Fred has said that there'll be some bags that maybe are old stock that are finally being brought forward as people go in to buy them, but I don't know if that's still the case, or whether we have a couple different vendors making them, whether there's a weight issue. I know that the plastic the width of it, the thickness can vary a little bit. I just wanted to find out if we could get an update about that, because people are definitely concerned.
Yeah, we certainly can. To my knowledge, there's been no difference in terms of the vendor or the specs or the product.
Okay.
So I haven't received any complaints. My office hasn't. That doesn't mean that there aren't any concerns, but like any trash bags, if you overstuff them,
Right.
that lip will pull. Buying these bags off the state bid list, one of the things is they want them to be as, I don't want to say as thin as possible, but they're not biodegradable, but part of it is to minimize the amount of plastic that's being created. So, we're working off the state bid list, the state vendors, so there's nothing unique that we're speccing out in these in terms of the bags, but on occasion, in the past, we've had a couple of batches where there were some issues. I'm not aware of that happening anytime recently, but we certainly can ask Fred to come in and speak to it.
If you wouldn't mind, that would be great, because there was definitely some
I'm
grumble
wondering,
with a few residents.
are they getting them in certain places they're having problems?
Yeah, they may
Or
be
is it-
leftovers.
Yeah,
I
maybe
don't know.
leftovers, if like, if they go to Hannaford's and buy some, they might have leftovers and they shoot them out, maybe they're not as good as, they should be. I know that there's some that are thicker, there's black in the inside.
Yes, like a gray line.
Yeah, right, they're more thicker and seem to hold up better than some of the other ones that I've heard, so. But I haven't heard really any complaints as of late, so,
I was surprised, actually, but it was a fair number of people that joined in on the
Really?
conversation, yes.
so.
So I did want to bring that
That
up,
might be up there, yeah.
and see if Fred could.
Yep, we'll have Fred come in, sure.
Okay, that'd be
Yep.
great. Thank you, that is my report.
Okay, Jeff?
I think Jason and Leslie kind of covered the bases here, but I did want to mention, the bridge in town by the old fire station. It's a great improvement. It really is. And, I did hear from a couple of folks who were amazed. This is the first, how quick it went. They thought it went really well. They thought it was well organized as far as, switching the lanes and everything. So, we tend to tell you when folks aren't happy, so we should tell you when they are too. So that was, and again, the town common, I think the only thing I can add to that is that, it's really starting to come to fruition. And, every time I think of this whole process, it truly is a grassroots effort. And, it's one of the things I think is really cool about this whole project. So to all those folks who worked so hard to bring this forward, we're getting there, and congratulations, and you did a hell of a job. So that concludes my report.
Excellent, thank you, Jeff. Dawn?
Okay, same thing on Church Street, same thing on the town common. Moving forward. The interview committee met tonight, and I would like to make a motion that we appoint Ronald Bonus as a constable in the town of Northborough.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. No report this evening. John? No report. Okay. Next on the agenda is public comments. Any public comments? It's your floor. Hearing none. Okay. Next thing on the agenda is new business. First thing is adoption of the health insurance opt-out program policy that we had discussed 2 meetings ago. John?
At your last meeting, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the incentive program that the staff is proposing with regard to our health insurance. And the policy in here has really not been amended or changed, or the thresholds since our last discussion. Again, the point of this policy or this incentive program is to encourage folks who have other alternatives for their health insurance to take that health insurance, typically from a spouse, rather than stay on the town's insurance. It's come to the point now where we're one of the few communities that does not have an incentive program like this. And I mentioned to you at your last meeting that the State Group Insurance Commission, which insures all the state employees as well as many municipalities are part of the GIC, they have a very similar incentive program. There is no downside to it. It's one of the ideas that we came forward with in this cycle in the hopes that we can incentivize even 5 to 10 people to have other alternatives to not choose the town's health insurance. We'll save on average between $15,000 and $16,000. So it's a good It's a good program. Again, we discussed it at length at your last meeting, but as is our approach, when it comes to policy decisions, I like to present it, discuss it, debate it one meeting, give you a chance to think about it, and then vote it at your next. So what's before you tonight is, for your consideration, is to actually adopt the program as presented at the last meeting.
Jeff?
Yeah, just, John, and I know that the board knows this, but just to emphasize, this is purely optional.
Yes, there is no requirement. This is entirely at the option of the employee. Thank you.
Just-
Yes, Don.
John, do you have any preliminary indications of how many people might take advantage of this?
You know, it's very difficult because you need intimate knowledge of somebody's marriage in terms of their spouse, what their employment is, whether or not the benefits that they may or may not have access to are comparable, and whether or not this incentive would be something they'd be interested in. I can tell you when the town of Westborough did it, they got 40 people who participated. They're much larger than us. When the town of Southborough did a very similar program, they got between 7 and 10 people. So if I were to guess, I mean, I would think that we would get somewhere between 5 to 10 people, hopefully. I'm aware of the situation for most of the municipal side employees, but 2/3 of our health insurance subscribers are K-8 school employees. So I really don't know those folks. I don't know what options they have available to them. So it's hard to really gauge. But again, if we pick up 5 people, if we pick up 10 people, I think that would be sort of the outer limits of what I would expect. And again, you have to have a spouse who not only has access to health insurance, but comparable health insurance where it would make sense for you to move. So, but I'm hoping somewhere between 5 and 10 people. But if we get any, it's a savings to the town. And as I said at your last meeting, there is no downside to this program for us. Anybody that's off, even if they move off just for 6 months, it's cost savings for us. From day one, it's cost savings. So that's why, again, as I said, the financial team came up with this and is unanimously recommending that the board approve it.
Yes, Jason?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in addition to the current employees who might move off our plan in order to take advantage of the incentive, it potentially is defensive. It discourages people who aren't on our plan currently to, if we lack the incentive, they might move to our plan because their spouse has an incentive on their plan. So in addition to any employees that might move off as a result of this, we potentially are defending against others moving on.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We discussed that at the last meeting, is we don't want to be the most attractive option. We certainly don't want to be at the point where if our health insurance is comparable to another employer and they offer this incentive, now suddenly we're more attractive. So that's an excellent point, Jason.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move the board vote to adopt the health insurance opt-out program as presented by the town administrator, effective July 1st, 2017.
Second?
We have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Okay. Next thing under new business, discussion of draft FY 2018 legislative, easy for you to say, legislative priorities.
Very good.
John?
In your packet is a draft of our legislative priorities list. This is a process that we've been doing ever since I've been the town administrator, and it's a grassroots process. It starts with staff and all the boards and committees in the town. They're asked to review any legislation that is either currently pending or being proposed by their associations, and to determine whether or not this is something that we want to support as an organization or oppose, depending on the nature of it. We also look at all of the requirements and the mandates that we face with regard to the state legislature in terms of Mass General laws or CMRs, and periodically we'll propose amendments to those. Now, you'll know in the last legislative cycle, the governor passed his Municipal Modernization Act. There are a lot of pieces of legislation and initiatives that the town was in favor of and had been bringing forward for many years that got incorporated into that. That was a very good process that Governor Baker went through, and I commend him for going through that process. So we come back this year, and again, all the requests come from the staff and the boards and committees. They come to my office. We synthesize them, and we try to get them down to the top 3 key things that we wanted to speak to our legislative delegation about. On March 13th, Diane, is that when they're coming in? Our legislative delegation is coming in to meet with you, as they do every year. And it is this top 3 list that I would anticipate we'd spend the bulk of our time discussing with them. As you all know, you've been on the board, all of you, or been involved in the process for many years. We want to make sure that the limited time that we have talking with our legislative delegation, that they're focused on the things that are most important to the town of Northborough. So the draft document that you have before you tonight is that synthesis of that process that's gone on for the last couple of months to get us down to the top 3 items that we want to talk to our legislative delegation about. And then there are several other smaller items or pieces of legislation that we want them to be aware of that are included in this letter as well. In terms of tonight, I just want to touch upon the top 3 items that we're bringing forward for your consideration. And by the way, this document is a draft, as always. If there are any comments or questions or amendments that the board would like us to make, we can do that. If by and large you find after I go through it that these are items that you're familiar with and you're supportive of, you can authorize the chairman and myself to finalize the letter as has been done for the last couple of years in the past. So our top 3 items are the same top 3 items that you've seen for the last several years, and they're the top 3 because they're the most critical to our operation and they're most critical to our financial condition. So the first one is requesting that the governor and the legislature increase their Chapter 90 authorization from $200 million statewide to $300 million statewide. Now, Chapter 90 is a bond transportation bill. This is essentially how municipalities pay for their infrastructure improvements. In most communities, the Chapter 90 distribution is the only money they spend on their roadways. Now, that's not the case in Northborough. As you know, a couple years ago, working through the DPW, we did a pavement management study and an investment plan. And we identified 3 different levels of investment that we could be making in our roadway infrastructure. And we mapped out what we thought the outcome would be over the next 10 years. And essentially, that plan told us that if we only invest Chapter 90 money over the next 10 years, our roadways would go from an average pavement condition index of 71, which is just like when you're in school, you know, 100's an A and 50's failed, and a 71 is about a C, C minus. Overall, our roadways are 71. If we only invested Chapter 90 for the next 10 years, they would start to dip down into the D minus area. And once you lose a roadway, it is vastly more expensive to rebuild a failed road rather than for dollars on the square yard to maintain it or to pave over it. So anyway, we did 3 options. If we only do Chapter 90, we're gonna start seeing our roads failed. If we invested $2 million, $2.1 million, we'd see significant improvement over the next 10 years, which is something that we cannot, as hardly any communities or any that I'm aware of can afford that level of investment. We chose the middle ground, which we affectionately referred to as a stem the bleeding, which means investing enough to make sure that over the next 10 years, our roads will improve a little, but they won't deteriorate. And as the finances improve, as the board continues to lobby the legislature to release more funds, we could invest more in our roads and our roads will go up. The key is we don't want things to deteriorate. So the long and short of it is the town has a plan. We've invested local funds to the tune of $300,000. At $300 million statewide, we would be right at that $1.1 million mark that we need to be at to maintain our roads. The state increased it to $300 million 1 year and then dropped it back down. And the governor is recommending right now $200 million statewide, which means about $500,000 for us. So the long and short of it is our funding, our pavement management plan is short about $300,000. Now, what you'll see as we go through and propose the capital budget at a subsequent meeting is we have $500,000 from Chapter 90 money, 300 in the DPW budget for roadway maintenance, and we're recommending 300,000 be appropriated in free cash through the capital budget to get us to that $1.1 million mark. We did this same approach last year, and we're doing it again this year. And as long as the state continues to underfund this, we're trying to keep it together because we want to make sure that our infrastructure does not deteriorate. So you'll see those recommendations coming forward. You'll see as we go through the draft of the town meeting warrant that we're proposing that. But in terms of what we're asking of our legislative delegation, we are very much enthusiastically asking them to support $300 million statewide, which would increase Northborough's share from about $500,000 to roughly $800,000. Then we can decide how much we can contribute locally to start to get us on the up curve. Incidentally, that 71 pavement condition index from the initial pass at our review of our infrastructure is now a 73. So we're not making radical increases, but had we not implemented this program and had we not funded it at the level that we did, that 71 would be a 69 instead of a 73. So we're trending, we're holding and we're trending in a positive direction. What we want to do is increase that improvement curve more. The state releasing some more funds for us statewide would do that. And again, this issue is nothing unique to Northborough. If you watch the news and you read the reports of the state of the United States, of the U.S. infrastructure, it's an issue across the entire country. So I'd say the thing that we do differently in Northborough is that we have measured the need and we have put together a funding plan, and that we know what each funding plan will get us in terms of results. And at a minimum, we're making sure that we're maintaining what we have so we aren't deteriorating. So that's a very positive thing for us. Yes, I think there's a question.
Yes, Jeff?
Hey, John, I don't know if you know the answer. I'm just curious. Do you know what the state average is on this paving index? Or if it's been done?
That's interesting, and I don't, and the reason for that is very few communities have gone through the planning that we've done to literally assess every single road mile on an objective evaluation criteria, and then to put together a plan like this.
The reason I ask is, I mean, anecdotally, like, you know, when I drive around, I, you know, do a lot of driving with work, it seems like our roads are in pretty decent shape compared to other towns. And I'm just, you know, just wondering if, you know, my guess would be the state average has got to be in the low 60s. But I got nothing other than anecdotal evidence to base that on.
And again, I can get you some information. The MMA has done surveys. The towns that they love to hear from are towns like Northborough, who have hard evidence about the state, the status of our roads, and what the additional appropriation, what would we do with it, and what would be the result. We can tell them exactly what our need is, what we would do with the money if they increased it, and most importantly, draw a direct correlation to this is what will happen to our pavement condition index over the next 3 to 5 years if this level of investment occurs. That's a very powerful argument because you're not just asking for funding in a vacuum, just saying the needs are great, we just need more money, our roads are bad. But they have specific plans and outcomes that are measurable.
And it's based on data.
It's based on the data, exactly. But I do know that the MMA does a survey, and I can get you the figures, but they're vastly under funded, the road infrastructure.
I mean, don't go to a lot of effort to do. I'm just,
Yeah.
you know, if something that crosses your desk, it'd be interesting.
I think the great thing about it is when you start looking at the roadways and you realize that for very short money, crack sealing roads and doing basic maintenance. Now, this stuff isn't exciting for most people, but if you can crack seal a road or chip seal it and keep it, except for our DPW director, he gets very excited when he talks about this stuff. Actually, as I do as well.
Crack seal.
But you can extend the life. You can extend the life of a roadway for 5 or 10 years if you maintain it, and if you don't. Once, I believe the figure in the pavement management plan is something like, you can maintain a road for $1 or $2 a square yard, or if you would let it fail and you have to replace it, the cost goes up to $22. So you want to maintain the roads and not allow them to fail. So everything we do to extend the life of the road gives us more time to continue to invest and make significant repaving and sealing, and it just, it's no different, as I always say, I always draw the correlation to these things to your own homes. You maintain the capital assets that you have, it's cheaper to maintain them than to allow them to deteriorate and have to replace them.
My hometown was in the mid-60s for roadway condition, same pavement management study. 2 years ago, we had an override, an operational override for it.
Yeah,
Bring the
for
roads up
roads.
into condition, yeah.
But do you think, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of communities that do that. I mean, we're kind of the head of the curve on pavement management and putting a plan together.
I'm sure, yeah, I
Because
can.
I have driven around a lot of, I mean, I really don't, know it unless it's
But like I
banging
said,
around.
it's just,
in
it's
potholes.
anecdotal, I mean, it's
I
just,
think the main thing to keep in mind is, we invested $1.1 million last year, right?
Yep.
For that money, we physically touched 20% of the roads in town with either crack sealing, an overlay, or some form of treatment that extended the life. And if you think about that, if that's a rough gauge, every 5 years, you have touched every road in the community. Again, it's not gonna be perfect, but that's what you're looking for. You're looking to cycle through and maintain your assets. And the critical thing here is we've been lucky enough that we've had free cash, which is budget surplus remaining from the closed-out fiscal year. We've had that available to appropriate to this. And so we've patched it together. This will be the second year we've patched it together. We really need a recurring revenue source in the form of Chapter 90 funds to deal with this recurring expense. So, but I think it's admirable that we're holding this together in the interim. But I think that's what makes, I think that's what makes our requests of our legislature so valid, is that we've measured it. And again, as you know, we're very much data-driven, and the measurable outcomes are the key. That if you give us another 300,000, I can tell you exactly what you're going to get for that.
yeah, just, comment on that is that, problem with that is if, 80% of the other towns and cities out there aren't doing it, because they're gonna be looking at this at the macro level, but,
Again, infrastructure needs, there's almost endless number of reports that have been done, and it's clear that, the bridges and the roadways in this country are in need of significant investment. And we were really encouraged when they released the 300 million about 2 years ago, and then they pulled back, because it needs to be done, it needs to be done consistently. So that is our top request. Our second top request is an increase to the special education circuit breaker funding. Under the governor's proposed 2018 budget, he's looking to level fund this program. However, as you all know, special education costs continue to rise. In fact, they're outpacing regular education costs. And by level funding this, essentially what you're doing is you're cutting it because the costs are going up. And since it's a zero-sum game, that means that those resources are coming out of oftentimes regular education. So we're asking, as we have for the last couple of years, for the legislature to increase the current funding formula to 100% of reimbursement. And I'm not going to go into, there's a lot of detail here in the draft letter. This came from the school committee. At our meeting on the 13th, the superintendent will be here to speak to this issue, as she is every year, because it is such an important piece of the funding for our school system. It can't be level funded because it is again, it's a cut. You have costs that are outpacing inflation as well as the cost of regular education, and these costs need to match that. So the superintendent will be here to kind of shed some more detail on that for us. But again, it shows that these top legislative priorities, they're done across the entire organization, which means the school department had a seat at the table. So one of the top three has come from the school committee and the school superintendent. The third and final top request that we have is something that doesn't cost the legislature any money. We're asking them for a legislative reform with regard to other post-employment benefits. OPEB is the single largest unfunded liability that's facing municipalities. It is on par or often greater than unfunded pension liability. For the town of Northborough, our OPEB liability is about $34.9 million. Now, if you remember, several years back, it was $90 million. And we did plan design changes, working with our employees. We adopted Section 18, which moved our retirees from our active plans to Medicare and then supplemented. And then we also, in 2011, we created an OPEB trust fund. And in the subsequent year, we put $500,000 aside into it. And we've put $500,000 in 3 times now. Fiscal 18, the current budget has $500,000 included for OPEB as well. And we will continue to fund it. We're working with our auditors and the actuaries on our unfunded liability. We've been told that there's only a handful of communities in the state that have taken real meaningful steps to fund their OPEB liability at the level that we have. Many have set up a trust fund. They've put Medicare Part D reimbursements in there. They've done, they've put some small amounts of free cash at the end of the fiscal year in there. But in our budget base is $500,000 a year going to fund this liability. And we will continue to do that. So on our side, we've measured the problem, we have a funding plan. However, we cannot fund our way out of this issue. It requires legislative reform. If you remember, we had a similar conversation several years back with regard to pension reform. We needed to change the way the benefits are accrued, and so that it's balanced with the number of years of service that you have in your age. It doesn't become a benefit that you get all at once after 10 years. So we've asked the legislature, as we have for the last several years, to engage in some reform for how OPEB benefits, because we don't set these benefits in terms of the timing and when people become vested. That's set under Mass General Law. So we're asking them to amend this. As you can imagine, there are some employee groups that have a different perspective than what we have in terms of the management of the town trying to fund this liability. So like every issue, there's a lot of back and forth, and just like pension reform, there's compromise involved. The bottom line is our legislature needs to continue to pursue this because it's too important. We need the reform. We can't fund our way out of the problem. The goal is, instead of, right now, if you're a town employee and you've been a town employee for 10 years or more and you're 55 or older and you retire, you have the ability to stay on the town's insurance at the current contribution rates. It's not free, but you're able to stay on it. What the reform is that we've asked for is that it becomes a measured, graduated benefit. So each year that you are employed and each year that you get older, a higher percentage of that benefit is earned. This won't save us, millions and millions of dollars, but it is one piece of the puzzle to solving this OPEB issue. There's not a lot of, well, I won't say there's not a lot of will at the state level to go after this. The thing that's interesting for us is this isn't a monetary issue. The first 2 items that we asked for, more Chapter 90 money and more circuit breaker funding, those are monetary issues, and I understand that the state has fiscal constraints just like we do. This is a legislative reform issue that doesn't cost them anything, yet will save the town money. So again, it's a mix of reform and funding requests that we've put together for them. So so at this point, we need to keep this on the forefront because it's really easy for them. It's not something they really want to be working on. I hate to say it. So we need to keep pressing them that this is important to us. So those are our top 3. We have a couple other general items that we bring up. One is just a broad statement that we're asking the legislative delegation to oppose any unfunded mandates, even though legally there is no such, there really shouldn't be any unfunded mandates. Still, they seem to find ways to go around that for things that create expenses for us that they deem not to be mandates. But as a blanket statement, we're asking them to oppose any unfunded mandates. As always, we ask them to modernize the procurement in terms of public construction laws. I'll just share one example with you, as I always do. I try to give you a contemporary example of how this is impacting us. When the town bids out a construction project, we have to pay what are known as prevailing wages. This is where the state determines what the pay level is for the various disciplines. So we approved at town meeting a new roof for the police station, and that was budgeted and estimated at $90,000. Had that been a private home or a private business, that roof would cost approximately $37,000, or it's approximately $37,000 higher. It would have been $37,000 less if we didn't pay prevailing wages. And so what we've asked for every year is that the legislature exempt projects under a threshold of $100,000, so that we can use good business practices, just like you would as a homeowner, or if you run a business, you would be looking out for the best interests of your business. The prevailing wage law, frankly, adds a 20-30% premium on particularly the smaller projects. What we find is that large companies understand the law, and they have people built into their overhead that just manage the whole prevailing wage certified payroll process. Smaller companies, if you want to hire a local roofer, they're not going to understand the prevailing wage law, and oftentimes it's more administrative hassle for them, and they won't even bid on a project for us. So you wind up with bigger companies. It winds up costing us more money. It reduces competition. All the things that you want to see to save money, this tends to de-incentivize those types of things. So that's something we asked for. The fire chief asked us to put something in here this year. Every year there's legislation trying to pay, if somebody is unfortunately injured and they use our ambulance services, the insurance companies would like to reimburse them instead of us, and then we have to chase them. So every year we oppose that type of legislative proposals, and so we're asking them. There's a Senate bill in here, 572, that we're asking them specifically to look at, that maintains the town's control over our rates. One of the things we don't want to have is we don't want to have somebody think we'll save money by capping municipal ambulance services at the Medicare, Medicaid rate. That doesn't reimburse the full amount. So what you're doing is you're subsidizing the insurance companies. So Senate Bill 572 is one that we're asking them specifically to take notice of. Last but not least, we also have some agricultural composting legislation that was filed by Senator Chandler on our behalf. It's Senate Bill number 407, and that's just increases the oversight, moves the oversight to DEP for composting facilities. We believe that'll give better responsiveness and oversight to those types of facilities in Northborough. That basically, in a nutshell, is the memo and the letter. So what we do with this is we send it out to our legislative delegation. We also send it to the governor's office. We invite our legislative delegation into our March 13th meeting, and we have a discussion. I think the most important thing is when we bring the senators and representatives in to meet with us, that we are on topic about and in agreement with what the top priorities are for Northborough, and that's what this process and this document attempts to do. So certainly open to any suggestions, and we can answer any questions that anybody may have with regard to the draft.
Questions, or you want to add to the list, Jason, down there?
The list gets longer tonight. I was just going to say that I'm certainly in agreement with the top three as they're specified here, and short-term and long-term, they have probably some of the most significant financial impacts to the town. The pavement and infrastructure management, the special education reimbursement, and the OPEB liability. So three very significant things, and I certainly support those as the top three that we will present to our legislators. So, thanks.
All right. That said, do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to authorize the chair and the town administrator to finalize and sign the legislative priorities letter for discussion with our state legislative delegation at the March 13th board meeting.
Second.
Here, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay. All right, update on preliminary FY 2018 budget. John?
Well, we've had a very interesting week and a half with regard to the budget. And by the way, both the legislative priorities letter and the memo I'm going to refer to with regard to the budget update are available over here if anybody's interested. So we've had a very interesting week. As you know, we've been watching our health insurance renewals. Right now, the market is trending over 10%. We have been extremely successful in the last 8 years with our health insurance renewals. Since fiscal 10, on average, our health insurance budget has gone up about 2.6%. It's been phenomenal. We have worked with our employee groups to do plan design changes. We did plan design changes in fiscal 17, the year that we are midway through right now, to get our renewals at a reasonable rate. Unfortunately, I see two trends that are negatively impacting the town of Northborough at the moment. One is our loss ratios, so our claims are very high at the moment. And sometimes they're very good. Other times, I always say it's a human condition. All it takes is a couple of people with significant medical issues that can drive your claims data up. So this is something we track on a monthly basis, and we track very closely. But our loss ratios are high at the moment. That means our renewals are going to be a little bit higher. So that's one piece. The second piece is that right now there's so much uncertainty with regard to the Affordable Care Act at the federal level that we're seeing the market trending at 10%. So between our loss ratios of being high, our claims data being high, and the market uncertainty, and by the way, this isn't, the claims data is specific to Northborough. The market trends are across the board. All of our neighboring communities, the Group Insurance Commission that insures all state employees and many municipalities as well, they actually froze their plans. So if somebody wanted to join the GIC right now, you wouldn't even be able to do that at the moment. And that was in response to the rate increases that carriers were quoting them. So this information is coming as it does every year at the 11th hour. We're watching our claims data and trying to, and hoping that some larger claims months will drop off and we'll see some better rates. That just hasn't been the case. So we very late in the game, we're looking now at some significant increases in our health insurance. So despite the trends for the last 8 years being very good, right now the renewals, our renewal for Fallon is 4%. Tufts and Harvard Pilgrim are somewhere between 10 and 15%. So we're working with our insurance advisor to get those down. What I would anticipate, we've already opened a dialogue on March 7th. We're going to be meeting with the Insurance Advisory Committee, which is all the town employees, to start talking about what are we going to do moving forward in terms of plan design changes and options. I think we need to start having those discussions. But in terms of the fiscal 18 budget right now, I'll bring you back to December 15th, where we met as a group and we do our financial trend monitoring. All key indicators we trend and we analyze things on a 10-year trend, looking back and projecting out 5 years forward. At that meeting, we had set the budget model to basically include about a 3.5% increase for the general government and the K-8 school budgets. That's what's needed to sustain the current level of services without reducing those services. That's a level service budget request. So when we got these rates in, I spent some time on the phone last weekend with the superintendent. Monday was a holiday. Last Monday was a holiday. We worked together all day. Essentially, 2/3 of the health insurance budget is school employees. So this rate increase, although it's budgeted on the general government side of the ledger, 2/3 of that expense is attributable to school employees. So we work together, and essentially, the superintendent, and working through her budget committees and ultimately school committee, is recommending a budget increase of 3.19%. That will allow the town's budget to go up to, as needed, 3.8%. It's about a $65,000, $70,000 swing. With that, I'm confident that, and some other nipping and tucking, I'm confident we're gonna be able to get the budget in accordance with the budget model and the projections that we went over in December. However, as I look forward, that is not something we're gonna be able to absorb and deal with moving forward on an annual basis. So we're gonna have to regroup and look at plan design changes moving forward, either in fiscal 19 or mid-year in fiscal 18, depending on the options that we derive. So the good news is, everybody, as always in this town, is working together, where the departments aren't pitted against each other, the boards and committees aren't pitted against each other. On Saturday, we had a 4-hour budget hearing with the Appropriations Committee to go over the K-8 school budget and the Algonquin Regional High School budget. It was an excellent meeting, and again, everybody's working together, and I think we're going to be successful again this year. Just this health insurance wrinkle is something that I won't say it was unexpected. You've heard me say this for the last 3 years, that every year I keep waiting for the health insurance to go crazy again, and it does this on a cyclical basis. Well, this is the year it's doing it. And again, until we have those renewal numbers and we fit those in, it's hard to talk about, the details of any other budget, because that number swamps everything. But in terms of the budget update memo, I do want to just bring you back to that December 15th meeting. That's where we laid out the goals and objectives for the upcoming 2018 budget. I'm not going to read all of the individual objectives, but we had four main goals. One is to protect and improve the town's overall financial condition, and we do that looking forward with the data and the trends that we measure and report to the board. We also said we're going to develop a budget in conformance with the town's comprehensive financial policies. As I say every year, we don't do gimmicks. There's no one-time revenues plugging holes. This budget, as every budget we bring forward, is in compliance with the universally approved and adopted comprehensive financial policies that we have, that all the boards and committees agreed to. The 3 is to maintain Northborough as an affordable place to live and operate a business. That means that we're living within the confines of Prop 2.5 and whatever our revenue estimates are. And the last one is to protect the town's long-run solvency beyond the immediate budget cycle. And things like funding our unfunded OPEB liability, investing in infrastructure. We don't present to town meeting a balanced budget by shifting these unfunded liabilities or these long-term expenses off. So it's a solid budget built on a solid foundation, and that's something that I'm very proud of. And recurring expenses are funded with recurring revenues. So there's no gimmicks. And I always jokingly tell the appropriations, if I were within 3 years of retirement, I can give you a budget with no tax increase and everybody would be happy. How would I do it? I'd plug the hole with one-time revenues. I'd stop investing in capital and infrastructure. I'd stop funding long-term liabilities. In your personal life, you could have more money to spend if you're not saving for retirement or putting money away for your child's education. At the municipal level, those are the things that we do. Those are the things that we spend a very long time every December when we set the budget for the table, when we set the table for the budget, talking about that, making sure that you understand and that the public understands that these are all pieces, and those long-term considerations are just as important as the desire to increase services right now. So, state aid, in terms of the budget assumptions, we are going with the governor's recommended state aid number, which is it's a 1.6% increase for Northborough specifically. I will share with you, I have a little excerpt here from the Mass Taxpayers Foundation, And essentially, they're saying that the state is anticipating revenue growth of 3.9%, and the Mass taxpayers is saying that's probably optimistic. And at this point, according to their analysis, they think the state's got about a $800 million deficit for the fiscal 18 budget. So they're still working through their budget, and they're still working through what, if anything, they're going to cut. However, I think the key thing for us always to keep in mind here is that the state is going to take care of their issues first with the revenues, and we sort of get what's left over. So even though state revenues have always increased significantly higher than local aid, we've been getting about a 1.5% increase in state aid for the last several years. I don't anticipate that changing. As you all know, we don't get our state aid numbers until well after town meeting. So we have to adopt a budget. We have to create a budget, adopt a budget, and move forward. And we'll be lucky if by July 1, we know what our actual final state aid is. And as I always say, in the event that state aid comes in higher, and generally speaking, the legislature tends to be a little more generous than the governor, in part because the legislature has a couple more months of revenue data upon which to base their recommendations. You know, the governor's budget has to be in, January 25th. So the legislature has a little bit more data. There might be a little bit more money there. Any additional money that comes in above what we budget can only be applied to reduce the tax rate. So there's no concern with us being conservative on that number. New growth, we're looking at $30 million in new growth. This is the same as we budgeted last year. Our fiscal 16 new growth came in at $31 million, so it's a pretty good number. That's going to give us approximately $521,000 in new tax revenues based on the new growth. Local receipts, building permits, motor vehicle, we're level funding at this point. Last year, we pushed those estimates up based on the trends. At this point, we don't see anything that would warrant increasing those again. I talked about the health insurance as being, something that I still don't have my final renewals, but we are budgeting, assuming a 10% increase in 2 of the 3 plans. So that's what we're working into our budget at the moment. So how does this all shake out for the key budget increases that people are looking at? The Northborough K-8 schools are going to increase 3.19, roughly 3.2%. The general government town non-school is going to go up 3.8%, and again, driven primarily by that health insurance factor. The Assabet Voc School, we do have our final assessment that did just come in this week, and although their assessment is up, the debt service on their project is down. The net impact is overall their assessment's going up about $12,000 or 1.1%. The high school budget, the overall budget is going up 3.8%. However, our assessment, which is based on our enrollment and the foundation budget that the state sets, our assessment is going up 3.4%, and the debt service is going down. So just like the Assabet, what we pay towards Algonquin is really the net impact of what's happening with the operating assessment as well as our share of the debt service. So this year, overall, we're looking at about a 3.2% increase in the assessment, which is very good for us. Last year, it was 6.9%. And again, we tend to focus on the overall budget increase. The assessments move with enrollment, and they move with changes in the foundation budget, which the state sets, that determines the Chapter 70 funds. So we have a couple of positive things that are happening here. The school superintendent has worked with us on the K-8 budget to manage that health insurance piece, so it's not all coming out of the town side. That's excellent collaboration. I can't say enough about the great cooperation we've gotten from the school administration. High school assessment is lower, almost half of what it was last year. That's positive. Assabet isn't going up much. It's $12,000, so that helps us as well. Because remember, we're not only looking at what's happening to the budget, but ultimately all these things factor into what it means in terms of the overall tax impact. So this is the status of the budget. As we get that final health insurance numbers, we'll be able to wrap up the last bits of the operating budget. We're still waiting on our debt service numbers as well. But by and large, if you look at this, it holds pretty true to the budget models that we discussed back in December. The one wrinkle being this health insurance. So that's where things stand at the moment.
Thank you, John. Question? You all right down there? Everybody all right?
Just comment, I guess, is,
Yep.
John, thank you. This just underscores the need, the whole budgeting process to, tend to be conservative and to, the whole sustainability, factor in there that, you can get in so much trouble by doing these one-time, hero shots. And we don't know what we can't predict the future, but we know there's gonna be some gotcha in there. There always is.
No.
So.
There's always a budget surprise. We've seen them year after
Yeah,
year.
and, it's no surprise that there's a surprise.
I should mention, it's a level service budget. The only service expansion really to speak of in the budget is one that the board agreed to and has supported for the last several years, and that is the staffing, implementation of the staffing study with regard to the fire department. We've already implemented the police staffing portion. The fire department, we've added one position a year to get up to five staff per shift. So in fiscal 18, that's the last position that will get us to that staffing. The compromise I worked out with the fire chief, knowing that it's a priority of the board and of the administration, is that we're going to introduce that position at the 6-month mark mid-year. That's how we're able to fit it, given some of the other constraints that we have. But that's really the only thing, and that's nothing new. That's based on the fiscal year 2016 study, which of course Dawn served on that committee. We spent the better part of a year and a half looking at staffing across the board, bringing in a consultant, doing an operational review, and again, measuring it, being very clear about if we increase the resources and the staffing to this level, what are going to be the specific outcomes that we will get for that. And everybody was unanimous in terms of their agreement. So that is one thing, unless something crazy happens and our state aid gets cut or something happens that isn't anticipated, that is the one thing that we are gonna move forward with implementing. But again, we're gonna do that halfway through the year. That's how we're able to fit that. Otherwise, it's a level service budget.
Well, with the financial trend monitoring meetings, I know that we do it every single year, but it's kind of forecasted. We kind of know what the pictures are gonna look like unless something happens like with health insurance or any of those other indicators. So I think that we're kind of ahead of the curve and we kind of prepared for, these type of situations. And you do an excellent job on kind of twerking everything and moving things around. And of course, the superintendent of the school working together with us is huge, as it had been in past years.
I can't say enough about the collaboration, the cooperation across all the departments and the school administration, and frankly, the employees. Now, remember, the last time we were in this situation was fiscal 10, where our health insurance was going up over 10%, and our budget was unbalanced. And the employees all came to the table, agreed to plan design changes that saved us over $500,000 that year. And we've made plan design changes multiple times over the last 8 years, again, with everybody working together. And that's how you get things. That's how you get things done. So I can't say enough about just the collaboration and cooperation in general.
Thank you, John. Okay. Next on the new business, request deficit spend snow and ice account. I'm sorry, Scott.
So if Scott
We have no money.
So if Scott would keep his budget in control, this would all go a lot easier.
Budget battles, here we go.
Mother Nature.
Yep. You can't stop Mother Nature.
That's true.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take it everybody has the memorandum outlining our snow and budget update
Yes, we
dated
do.
February 22nd. Well, we had 15 recordable snow events this season as of the date of the memorandum on the 22nd, totaling a little over 46 inches of snow. The ironic thing is that's the same number of events we had 2 years ago when we had 3 blizzards within that window. We had 15 snow events. A lot less snow, a lot less inches. There was 102 at that point. Here there's 46. You're still responding 15 times. The line item budget for snow and ice removal for FY17 is $346,200. We've budget spent a little over $70,000, so that's above the 346 that was allocated. Our total budget expenditure now is a little over $415,000. One thing to take note of, while the snow event quantity is similar to our largest year of recent, what this doesn't present are the ice events. Everybody remembers all the overnight icings we've had. We had one on New Year's Eve. It actually occurred very early New Year's morning. On an ice event like that, on overtime, not holiday, but on overtime pay, it costs about $6,000 per ice treatment, per salt treatment. On a long-term event like that, that was a 10-hour event, we'll treat the roads 4 or 5 times. That specific event was a 5-time treatment. It cost us $30,000. We had another one of those the Monday before Thursday's big storm event. That was a 5-time treatment with a follow-up first thing in the morning, so we actually treated 6 times. That's $36,000. Those 2 events themselves, can account for the deficit. So while we look at a year like we've had this year, light snow, we had one big snowblower event, everything else has been kind of scraping the driveways, the ice is very expensive.
If I
ahead, John.
may,
Yep.
through the chair, a couple of points I'd like to make. One, our snow and ice budget is a 6-year rolling average. So before anybody thinks, boy, every year it seems like you're overexpending your snow and ice budget, I'll remind you that last year it was under budget. But we budget a 6-year rolling average to be realistic in terms of what we're expecting. If we tend to get blizzards, we also oftentimes will receive state or federal reimbursement. We just got our state and our federal reimbursement from the storm from 2 years ago. So it's usually not very timely, which is why we always make sure that we have available funds to deal with the emergency, even if we might get reimbursed for it later. But the point being here, the overall budget is a realistic and adequate budget. It just fluctuates dramatically based on whatever Mother Nature wants to do. The other is, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D, in order for us to deficit spend, it requires approval of the Board of Selectmen. Now, we have 2 ways that we can deal with this deficit. Snow and ice is the only account that we can, in the current year, deficit spend. We don't have that ability legally under Mass General Law for any other departments or accounts that we have in town. It's only snow and ice because you can't predict what's going to happen. You have 2 ways that you can manage that deficit when you get to year's end. You can transfer funds from other accounts at the end of the year if you know you've got some budget surplus someplace else and manage that, that overage. Or you can take that deficit and move it into the next fiscal year and add it to your tax increase for the next fiscal year. I can tell you, at least in the last 8 years that I've been the administrator, my very strong preference is to deal with the shortage within the year. So identify funds that you can freeze or hold to take care of that deficit. Right now, the deficit's about $70,000. We have a $175,000 appropriation committee emergency reserve fund. So right now, this deficit can be managed within that reserve account. If we don't get any more snow,
The deficit will go up, even in that event.
if we don't get any blizzards or ice storms or anything tremendous, I anticipate, we should be able to manage that. But again, we don't know what's going to occur. Oftentimes, March can be the snowiest month of the year. So I think if you look across the state, everybody is pretty much in the same position with the snow and ice. Most folks are really at the end here, and we're all hoping that, March is gonna come in like a lamb and go out like a lamb and skip the lion part for once.
Would be
But that remains to be seen. So every effort will be made by the staff to identify places where we can hold that deficit and manage it within the current fiscal year. We do not ever like to kick the can. We try to deal with things in real time, and we will do that again. So barring any major, blizzards and storms, we will do everything we can to maintain that and manage that deficit within the current fiscal year. But it does require your approval tonight, the deficit spend. Whether or not you want to or not, it's going to snow. So,
Yeah, there's additional expenses needed, just moving forward on chemicals. I know our calcium chloride tanks are low, those need to be refilled. Salt trucks are always coming in, it's gonna get icy again at night, and, plow edges, those just seem to keep on coming.
Let's keep on coming. Any questions from anybody? Yes,
I
Leslie?
just had a quick question while you're here. How have you found residents to be in terms of parking during storms? Have the trucks been able to do what they need to do for the most part? Have they run
The
into
residents have been
problems?
fantastic. We receive more calls complimenting the department's removal and the conditions of the roads in town than complaints. We get the complaints, we're very responsive to them. They're our customers, we make sure that we meet their needs. I make it a point, I live 3 communities away, I make it a point to drive the back roads when I'm coming in on a snowy morning, and, I know when I turn over into the town line at Northborough, it changes drastically. So the guys and the contractors work very hard, and they do a great job, and the residents support them. They stay off the roads.
We appreciate that. Please pass that on.
Thank you,
to
Leslie.
us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
We do, and
Yes.
I so wanted to just look at you, Scott, and say, how could you let this happen? Anyways, with that, I move the board vote to allow expenditures in excess of available appropriations for snow and ice removal and any other related expenses pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 31D.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board.
You're welcome.
thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, review of preliminary town meeting warrant. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your packet is a draft listing of the anticipated warrant articles that we'll see coming for the April 24th annual town meeting. And just by way of order of magnitude, in 2015, we had 64 articles. In 2016, we had 43 articles. And in 17, as of right now, we're about 54 articles, so kind of right in the middle. I'll just remind you all that the year we had 64 articles, we finished it in almost all of those in one night. So that is possible.
Is that the night that somebody wanted to challenge the quorum?
So
All throwing stuff back.
I am hopeful, and I'm just going to run you through this in terms of the major blocks of the types of articles that we have. There's nothing here that I think should jump out at you. The first set of articles going through 1 through 20, these are all the budgets and the revolving funds, the budgets that we just spent time this evening reviewing, and then reauthorization of the revolving funds. So those are standard articles. We tend to move quickly through those. Articles 21 through 33, there's 13 capital improvement articles. So the capital budget consists of these 13 projects. These are all routine equipment replacements and building improvements by and large. There's no major building projects like the Lincoln Street School or the fire station project or anything like that on this warrant. It's primarily cruisers, a brush truck for the fire department, several pieces of equipment for DPW. That $300,000 we talked about under the legislative priorities list for road improvements, that's where it's coming in into the CIP here. That's article, right now, draft article number 27. And then one thing I'm very pleased to report, based on available funds, we have the Proctor School pitched roof replacement. That was in the 6-year capital improvement plan for fiscal 2019. I'm very pleased to report tonight that we're going to be able to fund that project in fiscal 18, 1 year early, and we're going to pay cash for it. So there's no additional tax impact. And by the way, all of these capital projects this year, there's approximately $1.47 million of capital investment that is being done on a pay-as-you-go basis. In other words, there'll be no additional tax impact to approve all of these projects and equipment. And that is a direct result of our free cash policy that this board adopted in 2010.
John, that 33, the pitch roof, that's just a partial replacement, right?
Yes, if you remember, last year or 2 years ago, we did a membrane overlay on the flat portion of the roof.
I remember that.
So it's pretty amazing when you think about this. We will have replaced or fixed the roof at Proctor on a pay-as-you-go basis. Just like the pitch roof we did at Peasley several years back, we did pay-as-you-go. Very few communities our size can do something like that, and it's based on, number one, a very good, true 6-year capital improvement plan, and number two, a free cash policy that identifies and designates recurring funds on a pay-as-you-go basis to make this capital investment. So I always draw the analogy in your personal life. If the washer or dryer dies, in an ideal world, you wouldn't charge that on your credit card, you'd replace it. For a town our size with a $60 million budget, a DPW truck or a police cruiser is the equivalent of a washer and dryer. You shouldn't be charging it on your credit card and paying finance charges if you can afford to pay cash for it. The only way you can afford to pay cash for it is to plan very well and have policies that support that, which we do. So out of all these projects, there's 13 projects, there's only one, that's the West Main Street Pump Station Improvements, it's Article 31. That's budgeted at $400,000, and that would be bonded, and the debt service would be paid for by sewer user fees, so not general tax dollars. So that's within the sewer enterprise fund. But all the other projects are pay-as-you-go. And by the way, at their meeting last Thursday, the Financial Planning Committee unanimously approves and recommends approval, rather, of all of these projects. So they've completed their process for the year, and they're working on their report for town meeting. So as you move through, the next batch of articles that you see are the community preservation articles, 39 through 45. We will have them come in at your March 13th meeting to go over those recommended projects. And then last but not least, Article 46 through 53 right now are the proposed zoning amendments. I've asked the town planner to put together a memo for all the boards and committees explaining the zoning amendments so that you can take a look at those. Typically, the selectmen, since the planning board is an elected body, you typically don't take a position on those, although you certainly could. But we'll get you some more information. The one I would draw your attention to, though, is Article 52, is a temporary moratorium, Article 51, a temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana. As you know, the state, the legislation changed, but the rules and regulations that need to be promulgated by the Department of Public Health have not really been done. So there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty with regard to recreational marijuana. What many communities are doing right now is to put in place, with the recommendation of town council, a moratorium just to allow some additional time for the regulations to develop and for the community to take a measured, thoughtful approach to what it is you want to do with regard to that. So what this does, it just hits the pause button, allows us some additional time. I think you're going to see a number of communities coming forward in this cycle with the proposed moratorium. So that, in a nutshell, is our town meeting warrant. I don't see anything amazingly controversial. As far as the budgets and the capital investment articles, I see these all as relatively routine and in accordance with our policies and the projections that we discussed back in December. So I would anticipate wide support for those items. And then, as I said, the CPC and the zoning articles will get you some additional information for an upcoming meeting. But that,
Kathy will come before us to...
Yep.
Okay.
So that meeting, so we're looking at as we map out your next several meetings, on the 13th, March 13th, you would close the warrant. We're going to try to get the CPC and the town planner in to go over their articles. On your meeting on March 27th, that is the joint hearing with the Appropriations Committee to go over the operating budgets, and that's a public hearing. And then your meeting on April 10th, which is your last meeting before town meeting, we will post the warrant. I'll give you a presentation on the capital projects. That financial planning will have concluded its report at that point. And that, at that meeting on April 10th, the board typically votes its town meeting recommendations. And then, of course, on April 24th is town meeting. So a very busy agendas for the next several meetings, but I'm just pleased to report everything is coming together. And again, everybody's working well together. I don't see any major issues coming forward.
Any questions about the town meeting warrant? Jason, yes.
I just had a quick question. John, Article number 20, application of bond premium, does that relate to Lincoln Street School, or is it other bonded projects?
Yes, yes. It has to do with, we got a bond premium when we went out for the Lincoln Street School debt. It has to be applied to the project. It has to be done a specific way through town meeting. It's a housekeeping matter, but yes, that's exactly what it's related to.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Next thing under new business is execution of cemetery deeds 1017.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I move the board vote to execute cemetery deed 1017.
Second.
Here, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Next thing is any other business come before the board? Hearing none. Next thing is executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, collective bargaining. Due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I move the board vote to enter into executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, collective bargaining. Due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board.
Second.
Here, a motion and a second. Jason.
Aye.
Leslie.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Don.
Aye.
Aye. We'll be coming out of executive session only to adjourn from open meeting. Thank you.